Hello everyone, this is Chris from Angling, Oregon. I just wanted to show you a quick product video on our flasher configuration and a typical herring rig for us. What we'll start with is your standard flashers. Everything that we have here has a flasher with the bead chain swivel above and below, and it comes with the dual lock, so all this will be included. What I typically do is I will take bottom swivel off, and this is just tied up 50-pound Berkley big game just for illustration purposes so you can see it on video. This isn't typically what we use. I like the fluorocarbon, and pretty much everything we have tied up is with the Seagar 40-pound fluorocarbon. But I like to run mine at a 48-inch leader, which I have pre-marked out here on my table. And I will go ahead and tie this on. I like to use the Palomar knots. Very sturdy stuff, super strong knots, and easy, quick to tie. Just make sure when you're tying the fluorocarbon that you really lube it up good, because they will burn relatively easy. So essentially I have my herring rig 4-foot leader to my flasher. Okay, that was simple. And what I go from there is I'll take this top one off, and I use our Angling Oregon tangle resistant bumpers. They come in a pack of 3, and they are 200-pound test. This one here is 24 inches in length, and I can tell that by the bead length or the bead color that's on it. Red is our 18, green is 24, and white is 36 inches in length. So what I'll use is the already crimped on, double crimped on swivel that is included with it, ball bearing swivel, and I just snap that on there. Okay, and that's essentially going to be my setup to my main line. And then what I have here is the last swivel that came off my flasher. And I had just, once again, for illustration purposes, just a small section of fishing line here, and I will tie the Palomar knot onto that as well. I typically use a 50-pound braid on my main line. I like the braided lines. They're extremely durable and last forever. So this will be the very top end. This is my main line that goes to my rod. Now what I didn't show you here is there's a lot of different variations on my main line of what you can use. What I've used in the past is a couple beads. Of course, you'd want to put these on before you tied that knot. A couple beads to protect the knot. And then there's various different types of sliders. Some people use just a little swivel, and I'll show some photos and some close-ups of this. It's just a swivel that you can hook to so it slides on your line. Another option that we use is just the plastic sliders. I like to have that on there. This is what I've typically used in the past, and that will be my dropper weight coming off of that. And my dropper weight varies depending on the leader that my bumper that I'm using. If I'm using 24, I typically will stay 18 to 20 inches. If I'm using the 18-inch, which is basically a buoy 10 rig that I like to fish, and I prefer 18. If I could fish it all the time, I would. I just think on some of the more finicky springers, just that little bit extra length on the pre-leader is important. But I would run on the 18-inch, I'd run a 16-inch. Whatever you want is just make sure that your dropper is shorter than the bumper. Something new that we're trying out as well, and I don't have any reports on this, so that's why I'm not selling them as of yet. But this is from one of my suppliers here. This is a sliding spreader, and what it is for those who've just used the regular wire spreaders in the past, it does the same thing, except this one slides. So if you were to get it tangled in the net, and the fish obviously too is hitting They're not going to feel that weight, so to speak, like they would with a fixed tide spreader. And another cool thing about it are these are flared on the ends so that you don't need the beads to go on to protect your hook. It'll actually just go right back and butt right up against your swivel. So I will let you know how these work for us this spring, and if it's something that we like, then we'll definitely make them available. So this is my typical herring setup. This is what I'm going to be fishing with this spring. I got my slider on my main line to the bead chain swivel, my 200-pound monofilament bumper. And what beauty about these things is they're all interchangeable. They're all disconnect. If you do get a tangle with your main line, and I always usually use just about a 20-pound test dropper. I don't use a whole lot. You do want to have a little bit of strength there fighting some of these fish, because especially if you're running a 16-ounce cannonball or a 12, just that popping, I mean, you can break them off, but a 20-pound is typically what I use. And the beauty of it with this 200-pound test is these things are almost bulletproof. We've fished buoy tin with them last year, and I think everybody that fished them only used one, and it lasted the entire time, and we were generally there 2 weeks. And that's, you know, they still tangle. I'm not going to say they don't, but they definitely help from tangling, and also if they do tangle, they become untangled very quickly. So it gets you right back out fishing. I just usually disconnect it, pop it apart, put it back together. But this would be your typical herring setup. Once again, this is a 24-inch onto my flasher, and then from my flasher, 48 inches to my herring. And these hooks here are at a 4-finger gap, which is your typical green label herring. And what we sell is the 4-aught Gamakatsu hooks, 4-finger gap on the fluorocarbon line, Seaguar fluorocarbon line, and then our BYO flashers along with the bumpers. And you can get all these. This is all comes included in our starter kits, or basically a beginner kit. But they're also good for people that have been fishing a while too, because it has everything you need, and you can get out there and get going. But that actually includes 2 of the herring setups, so you'll get 2 pre-tied, fixed tied. When I say fixed, is the top hook is not a slider. Fixed tied herring rigs, and the fluorocarbon is over 6 feet in length, so you can actually tie it. I left plenty there, so when you do tie your knots, you can actually still have 6 foot from the, actually probably a little bit more than, from the main line or your flasher to your herring. Then you can also include 2 flashers of your choice. You just make sure to include in the comments what colors that you want, or just name them. And then a packet of the tingle resistant bumpers, which you will get 3 in a packet. And 3 will last a long time unless you do a mainline break, which it does happen. But if you do have your line test appropriate, that you have your 20-pound test dropper, and then you're using like a 40-pound tail end on it. So if you get your herring rig hooked up, you're going to break those off before you break your main line. But not to say that it doesn't happen. And that's a typical setup for what we use. Once again, those kits have 2 herring rigs, 2 flashers, and 1 package of the tingle resistant bumpers, which is everything that you need to tie up and get fishing, with the exception of your slider. And once again, there's a lot of variations. You can go pretty elaborate like this guy here, or you can just go super simple, as much as just taking a snap swivel and tie that to your weight, and then just snap that swivel on your line and let it slide. Just make sure if you do that to put some beads in there. And I think that's pretty much it. All right, thanks guys. Thanks for watching. Anglin, Oregon.